Good morning and good afternoon, good evening, grasshoppers. This is our second in the series of Cecil Purdy versus opponents during his 1930s era run. This is the first world correspondence champion, Cecil Purdy, as he was also several times Australian champion. And it is pretty clear, having gone over a few of these games already, that the quality of play at this level in the 1930s is not quite the same as what we'd expect from many other world champions of the era, like Capablanca or Alekhine, for example. And in this particular instance, after e4, e5, now Purdy was a rather universal player, as we will also see games with him playing d4. In fact, quite modern ideas in d4 as well, as in this particular example. He no longer plays, as he did in 1930 against Cohen, the Vienna game, which is our first stream. And he didn't necessarily play that very well. After all, the theory of the opening, or perhaps his attention to detail in the theory of the opening wasn't as keen. But, of course, as he has matured, and this is 1937 versus R.F. Condon, he basically plays the Spanish defense. Now, today, this particular opening is usually seen more frequently if black is playing for excitement with a6 and bishop a4 inserted. However, in 1937, the opponent chooses the rather straightforward Cozio Defence. Now, this is a little bit of a cramped defense, and personally, I would probably be playing the move c3 or castles. But of course, he plays the most popular, or I shouldn't say the most popular, but perhaps easily one of the most resilient methods in fighting against black's possible d5. Although I don't think it's really a threat, because the threat to the e5 pawn with the knight on c6 being pinned is real. And black, of course, plays g6, weakening this particular diagonal to the queen. Personally, if this had been played on the third move, I would have immediately played d4, followed by bishop to g5, as played by Grandmaster Mark Arnold when he was younger against Fabiano Caruana. They were both rated around 2000, and Mark more or less took advantage of the Smyslov defense, or g6, as Fabiano was ready to play it while he was living here in New York in his youth. It was only after he moved to Europe and had the tutelage of Grandmaster Alexander Chernin that he began playing more dynamic defenses with black than the Smyslov rather passive defense of the Ruy Lopez, which was a little bit of a product of his work with Moran Cher. Perhaps this was personality-based. In any event, in this particular instance, Condon doesn't hesitate in opening up the center and trying to take advantage of this position's space, and at the same time, black's confusion as to which direction he is going to be placing his bishop. After all, he already had a diagonal, which he willingly blocked with knight on g to e7. And as you can see in this particular moment, this move is usually designed against, basically, knight on g to e7 is usually designed against knight takes d4, queen takes d4, knight to c6, hitting the queen again. So this is a very logical consequence that black's plan has been thwarted. However, as black does put more pressure on the d4 knight, we support it. And as black quickly urges his king to safety, now white has a choice of several moves. And we will go in this particular moment with some candidates for white. Let's get the party started. Candidates. And in this particular manner, you're looking for all of the good moves in the position. Feel free to type as many as you'd like. I recommend at least 3. So, for example, there are king moves, pawn moves, bishop moves, and perhaps queen moves in this position. I don't wish to give it away, but the move that Purdy chooses is the second best move in the position. And one has to be aware of what the best moves are in order to accomplish the primary goal, the primary directive of activating all of our pieces, controlling the center, and being aware of our king safety, preparing to get it out of the way. So in this particular instance, rather than playing knight to c6, knight takes c6 is the silicon friend Bruce, the vegetarian killer fish recommendation. The opposite side's castling routine initiated by Purdy is perhaps best after all. Queen to d2. And another move in this particular position might have been simply to castle. However, after the move queen to d2, black plays a rather passive move to try to hold the center. He's not interested at all, it seems, in trying to fight for the center with d5. d5 was the best move in the position, and it should be considered that basically, after all, that's why we put the knight on e7. It was to fight for the center. Now, we can choose to fight for the center, give up the center, or hold the center. And in this particular manner, black has the temperament to hold the center. White does have a space advantage. White does get castled queenside. And now black challenges the bishop. In this moment, we are going to, once again, ask for candidate moves. And with the candidate moves comes a scooping up, as though you are panning for gold. All the good moves in the position. In this particular case, we only have one knight move and several bishop moves to choose from, since our bishop is being put to the question. Which one is the best, and which one did Purdy play? Once again, Purdy does not necessarily play the number 1 move, but the number 2 move in the position. I won't fault him for his choice. So in this particular instance, given that we have a space advantage and that we are only improving the knight on e7, the best move in the position is bishop to e2, maintaining our space advantage and avoiding the exchange of material, which will make life a lot more playable and pleasant for black. However, Purdy does choose to exchange on c6, and in this particular moment, he embarks on a further very natural extension of his plan as we ask for candidate moves in this position. And I am working on your ability to choose moves in a variety of manners where every piece is involved, where all of the plans might interlap or cross over with one another. And remember that previous candidate moves, although not particularly the previous one, but for one knight move, remain. So in this particular instance, we have the move h4. And after all, we are castled on opposite sides of the board. This is the best move in the position. It is extremely natural to play for the pawn storm on the king side, given that black has a fianchettoed king position. And the position is not unlike a dragon, with the exception that black does not have an open c file. The pawn would normally be on e7 instead of c7. Now, black should stop this in its tracks. If this were a modern day era game, we know what's in store for us if we don't stop it with the move h5, which is almost an only move. Instead, black seeks to complete his development as a normal e4 or open game player might. And in this particular moment, we are going to ask once again for candidate moves. And when you do come up with several candidate moves in the position, you should get into the habit of committing yourself to one, either by circling it, writing down as many as you can find as quickly as you can. After all, another pawn might be enlisted here, a knight move, perhaps even a rook move, or a bishop move. No, let's not think about bishop moves. So therefore, our choices are very clear. Which is the best move, though? This is a difficult decision. I don't think I would have been able to make the best move in the position, and I would have chosen Purdy's move as well. Honestly, I would have chosen Purdy's move as well. Purdy chose the move h5 while knight takes e6, loosening the pawn structure and then proceeding with h5. Seems to be best. Black has an opportunity to bring a knight across to the king side to defend. However, Purdy chooses the immediate h5, and black enlists, rather than defends properly, enlists the help of an additional defender. Obviously, if we're being attacked, it would help to try to exchange pieces. Perhaps with knight takes d4, bishop takes d4, bishop takes d4. And if necessary, we have to deal with the potential opening up of the h file. So we would have to continue with queen to g5 check. And when king to b1 is played, we can probably bother the queen and drive it off of that lovely diagonal. However, we could also bring over the rook to from a to d8, and if the h file is open, we can capture with the g pawn. I'm sorry, with the f pawn. F takes g6. We don't have to allow ourselves to be mated. Queen to e5 is also a very realistic possibility, but not recommended. H6 would also prevent anything along the H file, given that we're going to recapture with the F pawn anyway. However, as it turns out, instead of exchanging pieces, Purdy chose queen to F6, and candidate moves for white in this position once again. We're going to really exercise the candidate move possibilities. After all, Purdy does not play the best move in the position. This is an opportunity for us to seek to improve ourselves as much as Purdy wished to improve his game. After all, black does have an idea for defending in this particular moment. So there are several knight moves to choose from. A pawn move. No bishop moves. King move. Now, Purdy should play knight takes e6, although I still, as in the previous move when he played h5, he was supposed to play knight takes e6, I still have a reservation against playing that move. But needless to say, as he plays the move h takes g6, black falters and does not understand that he now has the f pawn available to him. He should capture with the f pawn, keep the h file closed, use the open F file and the open E file for counterplay. However, instead, he chooses to capture with the H pawn. We all know how dangerous this would be. And only now does he capture on the E6 with the knight. And candidate moves for white. One more time, getting a real workout in this particular stream. Now, you can do this with almost any video, albeit watching the World Rapid and Blitz in their commentary, pausing it so you don't listen to the commentary, perhaps, maybe even hitting the fast forward button 5 seconds, 10 seconds at a time, whatever your setting is set to. And in this manner, being able to appreciate the mass.
Said, why does he capture the bishop, not the knight?
I believe that this weakens the king side. At the same time, we know what's going to happen in the game.
The knight damage his structure?
In that particular position, let's just go back. Capturing the knight is also an option. It's just not quite as good. However, the best move, once again, in this particular position, was not to capture the bishop. It was to, as you already know, because we have a space advantage, avoid exchanges altogether. He really missed the boat on being able to capture on E6 before the exchange on H takes G6. And at that moment, he was decoying the bishop, the F pawn, to this square so that the pawn couldn't recapture on G6. I agree that it's a little late in the day for me, so I'm a little sluggish and I am making mistakes. So I really do appreciate your question on that front. Since we do have a space advantage, keeping the knight and avoiding exchanges would be ideal. However, there is a threat to the A2 pawn, which could have been amended by king to H1 earlier as well. And that was also an option. However, here, I believe that he was actually just trying to keep black from exchanging on D4, and he felt like the knight was not necessarily a useful defensive piece. Yeah, I don't think it would have changed the course of the game that much. After all, Purdy does seem to be that much stronger than all of his peers. In any event, in this particular moment, while he could play king to B1, which is the best move if you were considering it, he does choose a move that begins to pry open the king side and leave black with the least safe king. And black does find the best move in this position, which is to try to create some counterplay with E5 and or D5 at the right moment, depending on what happens. Candidate moves for white. Let's follow up on our ideas. We have one particular tactic in the wings, which Purdy may or may not desire to play for. And then we'll see, after the following move, black's idea of counterplay and how that bishop may have helped. So certainly taking the knight would have resisted some of the counterplay. F4 would have stopped the knight from going to E5. In any case, that was his plan. So don't be afraid in your mind's eye, noting several good moves for white in this position. Whether that includes a rook move, pawn moves. I don't see any good bishop or knight moves just yet. So therefore, he chooses to try to take advantage of the weakness of this diagonal by playing the move F5. And it's pretty obvious that this move is a freebie, given the threat of playing bishop to G5. Black immediately plays knight to B4, and we have to consider what's going on as we weigh the candidate moves in this position as well. Now, in the old days of World Champion Studies, I put them on a hiatus for quite a while. These were reward requests on stream from viewers. Ron Hay, in this particular case, I'm catching up on some that are backlogged as IRL post-COVID came in, and I just couldn't manage 2.5-hour streams with 4 or 5 games, 2 to 2.5-hour streams with 4 or 5 games. So instead, I've broken up each particular player into shorter segments of 30 minutes. And the 30 minutes per game ritual seems to hold pretty well. So if you haven't already decided, there is the threat of playing knight takes a2 check. And should the king move, knight takes c3 check. Obviously, we cannot recapture with knight takes c3 check as the queen is coming in here, so therefore we have to take care of it. Absolutely, Infirmum. You're on the ball. It's necessary. We cannot play the move bishop to g5 straight away, or lest our king side be ripped apart nearly completely with check. We wouldn't have much of a choice after knight takes a2, king moves, knight takes c3 check, b takes c3, queen takes c3. And not only are we threatened with mate on either of these squares, but the exchange of queens will be forced in our attack, and this battery on the G file may come to an end. We might pick up the exchange, though. That much is true. However, that's not what white is aiming for, so you were right on the ball with king to b1. And in this particular case, after e takes f5, we follow through with our threat, skewering the queen to the right. The queen finds a rather awkward square. Queen f7. Queen e5 would have been more to the point, keeping the pressure on the long diagonal, but he chooses queen f7 to keep an eye on the square. a2. And after bishop takes d8, it is a small wonder to me if we could have gotten away with, as black, bishop takes c3. And for a moment, I'll just ask, we'll give it about 45 seconds. This is not your normal candidate's move. If bishop takes c3, what move would white have needed to make to stymie the counterplay that might follow? If black were to play bishop takes c3, threatening queen takes a2 check, queen to a1 check, what move might white have played after bishop takes c3? And you have to ask yourself these questions all the time while the opponent is thinking. After all, especially if they don't recapture right away. If black had played bishop takes c3, we could calmly have played queen takes c3 with the threat of mate on h8, or with the threat of exchanging rooks on f8. There is very little to be worried about in this particular position as we run away. The queen is in the lurch. The thing that enticed me most that I was inquiring about was the fact that many might have tried to consider or hallucinated considering queen h6, or not queen h6, or rook to h8 check, but the bishop can recapture and not the king. If the king were to recapture, white would not only pick up the bishop with check and perhaps even the knight, but we could even throw in the move rook to h1. And white is clearly better in this particular instance. Whether they block with the queen, queen takes b4, rook takes d8, and e takes f5. Black's king is far, far, far the least safe, these two. Unfortunately, though, this hallucination is met by bishop takes h8, forgetting that the bishop that is far reaching into the opponent's position can retreat and take care of business. So not king takes h8, but bishop takes h8. Therefore, after the move bishop takes d8, black simply recaptures. White continues to try to open up lines. G takes f5, and queen to g5 hits the rook. Black does choose rook to f8. And now white prepares to double rooks while hitting the knight on b4, which is pretty logical. The knight returns to safety. In fact, that knight probably should have come to the aid of the king side when it had the chance, awaiting any f5 pawn push, but knight to b4 was a little wayward. And we are going to go with some candidate moves for white, as Purdy does find the best follow-up in this particular position. Great to have you on YouTube. Thank you. I am FIDE trainer and National Master John MacArthur. I have been coaching, teaching, and training since 1984. I have made all of the mistakes that the young coaches are making today, and I see them happening all the time, whether it's a concentration on openings rather than on great games. And the one thing is in a TikTok or Instagram reel / YouTube short that I released earlier today.
Knight to d5 is what I would play.
Bingo! Knight to d5, shutting off any counterplay on the queen side. Also preventing queen to f6 with the forcing of the queen trade. Obviously, we're not worried about bishop takes c3, but at the same time, we are winning the queen if the knight were to try to migrate to the king side. We would be able to win the queen with knight to e7 check, since there's no logical response. You were right, baby.
I was right.
But it also helps, like you're panning for gold, to scoop up all the good moves in the position. I often have students write down 3, 4, or 5 moves on a worksheet and basically circle the move that they would play using pen so that they can't erase and go back. I usually check to make sure that all of them have circled in the classroom, and then, and only then, do I give the answer. Just this here. Now, black chooses rook to e8, but queen to e6, perhaps giving the king a little bit of air, would have been ideal. And candidate moves for white. Probably and possibly our last one. As I intend to shave off the waiting time at the beginning of a video that impaired the start time ever so slowly. Had a few technical difficulties as we began. I'm hoping to do at least one more of these this evening before I exit stage left toward the boudoir, the sleeping domain.
Infirmo.
Now,
Said. d1 rook to h1.
Very good. Absolutely. With the pin of the bishop to the king, this is checkmate that's being threatened. Rook to h8, checkmate is being threatened. However, black does choose to play queen takes d5 to give his king some leeway. And now we will do, I was wrong before, our last candidate move, choice. There are two correct answers, obviously. One which is ideal, and another which is at least as good. And then we will unfortunately see Purdy flailing about in his technique just a little bit before he ends the game. Because the fact is, the king does find a little bit of an escape plan. Infirmum? In the Twitch chat, we have subscribers only, but the TTS is still available to those on YouTube. So this is primarily a YouTube instruction stream with benefit for Twitch subscribers, obviously. Streaming simultaneously. I'm not going to stream on TikTok. Now, interestingly enough,
said, I think sacrificing the queen then checkmating with rooks or rook to h8.
now we're going to take a lesson from Fisher here, and we're not going to sacrifice. It's okay.
Sorry, I'm a bit slow.
You're not as slow as I am. I am extremely tired as I get up very early in the morning, even on the weekends. During the week, we have the 5 a.m. streams, and I'll have another one tomorrow morning, 5 a.m. New York time. I don't see the time listed on this particular stream, but it is 9 p.m. here in New York. We have a chance to eliminate the escape squares for the king. Bear down on h8 with queen to g6 in a very quiet moment. And as black makes an attempt to exit stage left, Purdy follows through on his plan. While the king looks like it's escaping. I don't entirely know that there's a good follow-up to rook takes e8. He chooses the correct move, queen takes. And rook to h6 check. And he could have played a little better at this moment. He chose queen to h5 check instead of queen to g6 check, which drives the king in front of the pawns, and perhaps we can go after him a little bit further here. It looks as though that's going to lead to a very quick mate. After rook to h4, there's no retreating, as queen to g7 and rook to h6 would end the game rather abruptly. As it turns out, since the king went to h5, he chooses queen to h5 check, and I'm positive that he's playing his moves rather too quickly at this moment, since he spies a tactic that is worthy of paying attention to. Now, we can achieve the same goal of trying to drive the king across the rank with queen h2 and then rook to h4 check. Obviously, the king cannot move back to g5 because of queen h4 mate. Instead, he chooses the tactic that I was warning you about. Now, obviously, if the king moves to e5, then we have queen to g3 check and similar attacks will follow. However, the king moves to e3 and Purdy falls for a rather dubious move here. He should have continued his very close to checkmating assault with queen to g3, but instead played the move rook to e6, expecting perhaps his opponent to accommodate him with queen takes e6 and queen to e1 check, winning the queen. It does, however, nearly work, but for the small fact that black gets to centralize his knight, and now we have to win the game all over again. As after queen to e1 check, the king runs perhaps what might be considered the wrong way. I would be definitely trying to get into that corner. The king runs to f4, g3 check, king to g4, and now he suddenly finds himself looking for a way to get his knight, get his rook around the powers of the knight. Queen to g2. Black is trying his best to complicate matters. Rook takes c7, just a momentary material grab. Certainly perfectly acceptable. And now black blunders into a mating net to a great extent. Basically, after knight f3, rook to g7 check. Black should play king to h3. And after rook to h7, king to g4, queen b4. We'll continue the attack, winning the queen. And we will simply win the game by picking up all of the material. I'm not entirely sure why knight h2 was the best move. However, instead of, after...
No more foreplay.
Namaste, Paul 184. Good to see you, man. Ladies and gentlemen, it's Paul 184, whose birthday we also celebrated a week ago. Today it was Ron Hayes' birthday, and I'm catching up on some study streams that I have owed him for quite some time. So instead of king to h3, black played the unfortunate king to h5, not seeing white's continuation, which, as I type a brief
said, I didn't expect to see you streaming at this time of day.
I was just explaining to Infirmum on YouTube that I am very tired since I begin streaming very early in the morning. So therefore, I am doing this as a partial birthday gift to Ron Hay on his birthday, the 30th of March. It's not that hard. 3:30 is a pretty easy date to remember. And everyone should see the checkmate in this position. Queen to e8 check.
Q8. Q8.
Followed by either queen to h8 or the move that Purdy played in the game, which was queen to g6 check. Needless to say, thank you for being here. The YouTube stream has plenty of playlists of great players, games, and studies. I'm going to be including this one into that playlist shortly. I do have to do a little bit of an amendment on the description because it does do the default description for the daily stream. I hope to see all of you for the next Purdy study stream, which should begin in 10 or 15 minutes. Hopefully no more than or less than 30 minutes. We are going to raid La Fong. We only have 2 viewers. I'm not sure if it's worthy of a raid. Let's raid Uncle Jesse. Why not?
Infirmum
said, thank you for stream and answering my questions.
I'll be back in less than 30 minutes with yet another Purdy stream. And in the next Purdy stream, Purdy is going to contribute to our understanding and theory of the Queen's Gambit. Thank you so much for being here. I hope you attend every day, or check out other and other videos, despite the poor quality of the microphone audio of some of the other instructional videos. Namaste, everyone. Thank you so much, Paul184, for the sub. Thank Infirmum for contributing through chat. It helps a lot. Chat is what powers our community and the strength of our improvement at chess. Cheers and ciao.